3 spine-chilling true Stalker-Ex stories. Unexplained terrors that will haunt you. Sarah thought she'd found solace after the wreckage of her divorce. But the chaos was just beginning. It started as a gentle ping on her phone in the dead of night. "I see you, Sarah," it read, creeping into her mind like a vengeful ghost. She glanced at her sleeping children. The warm glow of reassurance dimmed quickly. Who was watching? As nights wore on, so did the cold sweat trickling down her spine. The phone pings grew louder in her thoughts around 2 a.m. Chilling texts arrived, snippets of her daily life twisted into a dark riddle. Things only someone inside her world would know. Her once safe cul-de-sac felt like a cage of anxiety, shadows shifting with every breath. She'd hear rustling outside, a low thud that made her heart race. At times, it sounded like footsteps creeping on gravel, her mind racing with visual nightmares. Outside her home, there were creaking sounds, whispers of a horrifying truth echoing against her sanity. She'd roll out of bed after night shifts, expecting to find the chaos inside the remnants of a life she fought to protect. Yet, she found nothing. The world too quiet. It mocked her. Frustrated with police dismissing her fears as paranoia, a wave of isolation crushed her. The familiar faces of neighbors now wore grins that felt tainted, filled with unspoken secrets. Something wasn't right in this suburban paradise. It felt like living in an urban jungle, where the normality turned grotesque. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Then, the unthinkable happened. Sarah returned home one night from her shift, the dull ache of fatigue heavy in her bones. The front door stood ajar, the wind rustling it softly like a breath in an otherwise silent night. A cold knot of fear gripped her heart. Had someone been in her house? She stepped inside, cautiously, pulse racing as she placed one foot after the other. Inside, the air felt thick with suspicion. Shadows danced along the walls, mocking her fear. She scanned the rooms, each corner sitting in stillness like a predator, hiding a secret. That knot tightened. It was more than just a door left open. It felt like an invitation to chaos. Was it paranoia or was it real? With each eerie encounter, she pieced together clues: a soda can in the yard, strange coincidences with a neighbor's lingering gaze, an old high school classmate resurfacing unexpectedly sent alarms blaring in her mind. She rationalized it all for a moment, convincing herself to breathe, yet her instincts screamed otherwise. Was the threat closer than she realized? Each creeping moment turned into a countdown. How long until the darkness that loomed over her shrouded everything she loved? Staring at the half-open door, the crack widening felt like a threshold into madness. Gazing into the depths of her fear, she knew she had to confront her stalker. But what if that confrontation painted a target on her back? The familiar comfort of her neighborhood had dissolved into a labyrinth of shadows. For every friendly face, there was a potential enemy veiled beneath that smile. As dread weighed down her thoughts, she clenched her phone, the only lifeline in this spiral of terror. Then, a loud pounding resonated against her door, echoing like a thunderclap, stealing her breath away. The shadows shifted, real and terrifying, and her heart raced toward an answer. What lay beyond the threshold? She felt trapped between the familiar and the unforgiving. As the pounding continued, the familiar warmth of home twisted into something monstrous. Tomorrow would bring a confrontation. Would it be salvation or the unveiling of her worst nightmares? The pounding intensified, a chaotic rhythm echoing through her body, each strike hammering into her chest like a grim warning. Sarah's fingers trembled over her phone, glowing ominously in the darkness. Should she call the police? What could they do? The bastion of safety had become a facade, Another layer to the silent betrayal she felt wrapping around her. Who's there? Her voice quivered, uncertainty pouring out with every syllable. The echoes resumed, booming against the sturdy door, dissolving any comfort that lingered in her home. No answer came, only the powerful thrusts against the wood that seemed to shake her very core. She took a deep breath, heart pounding, and began to inch toward the door. The light from the street lamps outside cast long shadows across the hall. Each step felt monumental, as if the house itself might pull her back into the comforting embrace of denial. But she needed to know. She gripped the knob, cold and unyielding, every fiber of her being screaming at her to retreat. What if it was him? The realization churned in her gut like acid. Still, her instincts spurred her on like a twisted sense of duty. She had to protect her children, no matter what lurked out there. With trembling hands, she turned the knob, each creak resounding in her mind like a class bell signaling doom. The door swung open, revealing the night thick with shadows, but no one stood there. A gust of cold wind rushed past her, pulling the door wide open and sending chills cascading down her spine. Just the wind, she tried to convince herself, though the knot in her stomach protested. She peered out into the darkness, scanning the empty street. Nothing moved, just the eerie stillness wrapped around her like a noose. And then, the silence shattered again, a soft shuffle echoing from the bushes across the street. She squinted, straining to see, when a figure emerged from the shadows, illuminated under the flickering streetlight. It was the man, her old classmate, Greg, a memory that stirred a cocktail of nostalgia and fear. The look in his eyes sent a shockwave through her. It was not the friendly face she remembered. "Sarah, it's me," he called out, but the image dancing in her mind was wrapped in darkness. A figure showing up uninvited was no longer innocence. It was an invasion. "What do you want?" Her voice seemed almost foreign to her, a mix of anger and desperation. He hesitated, guilt flickering across his features. "I just wanted to talk. I've been worried." "Worried? About what?" she snapped, panic slicing through her. He stepped closer, invading her space, invading her mind. "About everything that's happened. I wanted to make sure you were okay." "You haven't replied to my messages." Messages, the pings, the constant reminders. He was part of it. He must be connected somehow. "Get away from me." Sarah's heart raced, adrenaline flooding her system, urging her to shut the door. Yet something tugged at her to listen, to understand. Were those text messages in her mind sending her spiraling into fear, or was he simply trying to help? The shadows around him seemed to slither, as if wrapping around his frame his sincerity was obscured, intertwined with a sinister aura. Beneath her hard shell of defiance, dread coiled tighter, squeezing the breath from her lungs. "Please just listen," he began, but she was done listening. Sarah slammed the door, locking it with trembling hands. Every breath felt heavier, the air thick with trepidation. What had she just done? Was Greg a victim or a monster? A lone thought flickered in her mind. She hadn't just shut the door on him. She had shut the door on the truth. And then her phone lit up again. Another message. "You can't hide forever." Sarah, as the words sank in, she felt the ground tilt beneath her. Was she imagining it? Or had this nightmare just escalated? She backed away from the door, heart racing as the dawning terror unfolded around her, peeling away her illusion of safety. But the hunt was on, lurking in the twilight, waiting for her next move. What if the night held more than her old classmate? What if she was far from the only target? Stepping deeper into her own home, she realized she was trapped in a war, one she wasn't prepared for. Shadows twisted at the edges of her vision, whispers echoing through her mind. Who else was watching? The chills slipped down her spine, unbearable. Was it time to fight back, or to run? She knew she had a choice ahead, but as dread seeped in, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The phone buzzed violently in her hand, jolting her from the haze of fear clouding her mind. She could barely focus on the screen, the words blurring as her pulse thundered in her ears. "You can't hide forever." Sarah was still lingered there, the threat like a ghost haunting her thoughts. Who was this person? The punctuation could have suggested a playful tone, but it felt sinister, wrapped in an urgency that sent shivers racing down her spine. No, she gasped, looking at the door as if it might somehow offer salvation. Running would mean abandoning everything she had worked for: her home, her children. But the locked door felt like a flimsy barrier against whatever horror was closing in on her. Get a grip, she muttered to herself. She had to think. Where were the kids? They were still asleep upstairs, safe for now. She turned her attention back to the message, her finger hovering over the screen, unsure whether to reply or block the phantom. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like a warning. It sounded angry, alive, cutting through the silence of her home. With nervous determination, she glanced back at the door. What if Greg was right outside, waiting for her to crack? She forced herself to take a deep breath, attempting to quiet the rising tide of panic. In a last desperate attempt to regain control, Sarah scrolled through her previous messages, desperate for context. Digging deep into her memory, she tried to recall if Greg had become entangled in anything sinister, but nothing surfaced. He had always been quiet, an outsider caught up in the chaos of school life. A sudden thud broke through her concentration, drawing her gaze back toward the entrance. It had come from the back of the house, a dull, rhythmic pounding resonating against the walls. Her heart raced. Not again. Was it someone trying to get in? Or was it just the house settling under the weight of the growing dread? "Mom, is everything all right?" A small voice called down from the staircase. Her heart sank as if pulled by a relentless tide. Emily, her 10-year-old, with the innocence still twinkling in her eyes, stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Stay upstairs, honey. Please," Sarah pleaded, her voice shaking. Emily hesitated but then turned slowly, retreating. The last thing Sarah wanted was to drag her daughter into this nightmare. But then, something shifted in her. She wasn't going to let fear rule her life. She straightened, forcing herself to be the parent she needed to be. She climbed the stairs, heartbeat pounding in her ears, feeling every creak beneath her feet as an echo of the chaos outside. The kids' room was just as she had left it, soft moonlight seeping through the curtains. They were nestled in their beds, blissfully unaware. Relief washed over her, but it was quickly suffocated by the dread creeping into every corner of her mind. Then, her phone buzzed again. Another message. She could almost feel its weight pressing against her, demanding her attention. "Time's almost up, Sarah. You're not safe in there." Her breath hitched painfully. The shadows began to close in, and she felt trapped again, her fortress of love shifting into a prison of torment. Someone was watching her, anticipating her every move. Fleeing felt impossible. Staying felt like a death sentence. "Enough!" she shouted to no one, her voice shattering the silence enveloping her home in a cloak of isolation. "Show yourself." But the house only answered with silence. It was as if the walls themselves had held their breath, waiting. Did I end that moment? Something cold brushed against her neck, a chill that made her freeze. She turned slowly, dread pooling in her gut as she faced the hallway behind her, heart pounding. Was this the beginning of the end? Would she really have to confront the monster lurking outside? And then, just as her mind raced with frantic thoughts, the lights flickered, throwing her world into flashing darkness and blinding fear. What would emerge from the shadows when the light returned? The darkness enveloped Sarah like a thick blanket, swallowing her surroundings whole. She squinted into the obsidian void, heart thudding violently against her chest. Time paused, every second stretching into eternity. She could hear nothing but the blood roaring in her ears and the soft, distant breaths of her children, oblivious to the encroaching nightmare. Then, the lights sputtered back on, revealing a faint flicker at the edge of the hallway. Shadows twisted like smoke, contorting into shapes that should not exist. Fear clawed at her throat, and she fought the urge to scream. "Mom?" Emily's voice echoed from the darkness, slurred and confused. Panic surged within her. Did her daughter hear that? Did she sense the danger? "Stay in your room," Sarah shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of dread. She took a cautious step forward, the floorboards creaking underfoot like a warning. The flickering light cast anxious shadows on the walls, teasing figures that seemed to drift just beyond reach. "Mom?" The voice was closer now. No, too close. "Emily, stay," she repeated, but her command was drowned out by a sudden crash downstairs. Glass shattered, a mix of shrill terror and pure chaos that shot through the silence like a bullet. The air grew heavier, stifling her breath. With each heartbeat, a crescendo of terror threatened to erupt. She took a hesitant step back, her mind racing. Should she call the police? That would take too long. The children needed her. But how could she confront whatever horror lurked within her own home? Before she could decide, fear took full control. She dashed back toward the kids' room, adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she swung the door open, she glanced around the darkened house, her eyes scanning for movement, but nothing appeared. The oppressive silence returned, wrapping around her like a vice. "Mom? What's happening?" Emily's small frame shifted in the moonlight, wide-eyed and shaken. Her brother, Lucas, stirred, only half awake, but there was no time for comfort. "Listen to me. You both need to stay here and be quiet. Promise me," Sarah urged, her voice a frantic whisper. The kids nodded, confusion mingling with fear. With a final look back to assure them she would be right back, she retreated into the hallway, heart racing once more. The pounding from downstairs had ceased, replaced by an unsettling quiet that suffocated the air. Trying to gather her thoughts, she stepped cautiously down the stairs. Each creak echoed loudly, an exclamation mark announcing her presence. She clenched her fists, determined not to let the fear consume her. As she reached the bottom, a soft movement caught her eye in the faint glow of the flickering light. It was a shadow, elongated and dark, slipping in and out of sight like a wisp of smoke. A cold sweat trickled down her back. A chilling realization washed over her. It was intentional. Whatever it was, it wanted her to follow. "Come out," she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is my house. You're not welcome here." To her horror, the soft whisper of laughter echoed around her. It was high-pitched and chilling, threading through the air like a serpent. The sound filled her with an icy grip of fear. She stumbled backward, eyes darting around. "Emily, Lucas, stay upstairs," she screamed, before forcing herself to press forward again, stalking toward the dark outline. Suddenly, the shadow lunged at the light, and she immediately recoiled. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had formed a figure appearing just at the edge of the illumination, grinning with predatory delight. Her breath hitched, panic flooding her senses. "What do you want?" she cried, desperation thinning her voice. It took a step closer, and in that moment, every instinct screamed for her to run. Her feet felt like lead, rooted in the graying light. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure dissipated, melting back into the darkness, leaving behind only an echo of laughter. And just like that, the lights flickered once more before dying completely again, plunging her into a night thicker than panic. "Get out," she shouted, but the house only responded with a relentless silence. Shaking with fear, every part of her begged to flee, but she knew she had to confront it. Time was running out. As she turned on her heel, bracing herself to face whatever terror awaited her in the gloom, a sudden loud banging echoed from the back of the house again. Louder this time, relentless and demanding. What was waiting for her behind that door? Her heart raced as she approached the back door, each step wearily calculated. The banging persisted, a thunderous demand resonating through the walls, sending tremors of dread rippling through her body. Panic clawed at her mind who or what was on the other side. "Mom!" Emily's voice pierced through the tension, and Sarah's stomach twisted with both worry and fear. She couldn't leave them alone. They needed her, but so did she. In the dim light spilling from the kitchen, everything felt foreign, haunted. The living room, once a safe haven, now seemed like a predator hidden in the shadows, watching. The thought of moving toward that door made her throat tighten, each ounce of courage trembling in her chest. With the chaos echoing from behind the door, She pressed her ear against the cool wood. It was there again, a rhythm that felt alive, pulsing with intention. A low, guttural growl rose beneath the frantic thuds. This was no stray animal trying to find shelter. It felt deliberate, like something had come to claim her, as though it belonged inside her home. "Get the kids," Sarah whispered to herself, firming her resolve. The thought of abandoning them was not an option, an unthinkable horror she couldn't bear to face. She might be unraveling as darkness gathered around her, but she had fought through torment before. She wouldn't let them down. She quickly spun on her heel, dashing back toward the stairs, slipping and skidding before finally catching herself. "Emily! Lucas!" she called, breathless, urgency edging her voice. "Mom?" They were still huddled tight in their room, small shadows against the thin sliver of light. She reached the door, pushing it open just a crack, peering in. "We have to go. Now." Fear glazed over their young faces. "What's happening?" Lucas asked, his eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. "The noise someone is banging on the door. I just need to check it, but I want you two to suddenly." A loud crash erupted from the back of the house, sending monstrous vibrations through the floor that nearly knocked her off balance. The air felt electric, filled with terrible tension, and she froze. Something had breached the door. "Stay close," Sarah said, her voice a mere whisper as she positioned herself in front of her children, inching back toward the hallway where the sound had come from. Lucas gripped Emily's hand tightly, the two exchanging frightened glances. They crept toward the darkness, limbs trembling as the shadows licked at their heels. Each step forward felt like a challenge against an invisible force. Then, a soft whisper threaded through the air, wrapping around Sarah like cold mist. Their waiting the words sent a chill racing down her spine. It pierced her mind, hurtling thoughts of escape, until a sudden metallic clang rang out from the kitchen. The hairs on her neck stood straight, the taste of fear sharp on her tongue. "Back," she hissed, pushing them behind her once more. But before she could formulate a plan, another shadow darted past her, rushing toward the source of the noise. It wasn't just a figment of the dark. It was a shape someone was inside. "No!" The scream burst from her lips as she lunged forward, instinct taking control. She had to protect them, but the chaotic whispers rose once more, wrapping around her like shadows thickening the air. Suddenly, everything stopped. The crashing ceased, slumped into an unsettling silence that draped over the house like a shroud. Then the whisper returned, more sinister, more tangible this time. "Come find me," a chilling promise, a taunt that echoed in her mind as it wound deeper into her bones. Sarah steadied herself, breathing hard, but she knew in her gut that whatever wanted her was only just getting started. It had plans, and she was part of them. The air thrummed with anticipation as she gripped the doorknob with both hands, feeling her heart hammering against her ribcage. With a sudden twist, she flung the door wide open. What lay beyond would either free her or turn the night into pure, merciless terror. What waited on the other side? The door swung open, revealing a darkness that birthed more shadows. The space beyond was strangely still, as if holding its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. The air felt thick, heavy with a sense of foreboding. Every instinct screamed for her to run, yet she stood frozen, her heart racing wildly. "Mom?" Emily's small voice cut through the silence, a thread of innocence woven into an unraveling tapestry of dread. Sarah glanced back at her children, their faces pale, mirroring the horror coiling in her chest. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice a shaky whisper, her legs unwilling to budge as she stepped into the unknown as they moved cautiously into the kitchen. A dull thud echoed from behind the refrigerator, as if something had fallen. No, something had been knocked there. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the staleness of the air, and her stomach twisted at the thought. "Let us check it out, Mom," Lucas said, trying to muster bravery, his small hand clutching Emily's with desperation. "No," she snapped, the sudden edge in her tone surprising even herself. "Stay here." The light from the window flickered unsteadily, casting erratic shadows. As they waited, The sound of soft scratching tickled her ears. She turned her head, straining to locate the source, fear prickling at the nape of her neck. "Mom," I feel Emily's voice trailed off, her wide eyes locking onto something behind Sarah. Before Sarah could ask, the scratching grew louder, a desperate, frantic noise that sent ice coursing through her veins. She turned abruptly, nearly tripping as her heart sank at the sight. A pair of small hands clawed at the kitchen floor, a visage emerging from the inky shadows, a face, gaunt and hollow-eyed, chewed up by darkness. "Help me," it croaked, voice cracking like glass. "Get back," Sarah cried, pulling her children closer, but they were already entranced, their bodies rigid with fear. "Mommy?" Lucas whimpered, his fingers slipping from hers. "No, it's not real. It can't be real." Sarah's mind raced. But the thing was getting closer, its movements unnaturally fluid as it crawled, a grotesque mockery of the innocence she cherished in her children. "Come find me," it gnawed at the edges of her sanity, the repetition drilling into her skull. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah lunged forward, driving a chair from the dining table toward it. The chair collided with the creature, if it was a creature at all. It collapsed into an all-consuming darkness, dissolving like mist under the weight of a downpour. "Mom!" Lucas screamed as the room spiraled into chaos. The lights flickered violently before extinguishing, plunging them into a darkness so complete it felt like a living entity, smothering them with darkness. "Get to the front door," Sarah shouted, regaining her footing as fear clawed at her throat. She shoved the chair back to the table and ushered her children toward the hallway, heart pounding against closed fists. But the whispers returned, echoing off the walls, a cacophony of despair that seeped into her mind. "You can't leave," they sang, as the darkness pressed against her, pulling her back. "Mom, please," Emily cried. Panic enveloped them, each heartbeat thrumming with the terror of the unknown. "No, we will not stay," she yelled defiantly, gripping the doorknob, twisting it, only to find it wouldn't budge. It felt as if the door itself quivered in refusal. "Stay with us," the voice rasped again, sinister, creeping closer, its hunger palpable. Sarah turned to face the dark, determination fueling her panic. "I won't let you have my children," she declared, feeling the ground beneath her shift as a shudder ran through the house. In that moment, a horrible realization gripped her. This darkness wanted them. It craved them like prey, and no matter how far they ran, it was a predator waiting to pounce. "Push, honey, push," she urged, the pressure building, suffocating her mind while her children watched, eyes wide with terror. And then the door suddenly flew open, revealing not escape, but more of the oppressive blackness they fled from. With nowhere left to turn, Sarah knew the battle was just beginning. What lay waiting in that darkness? The whispers promised answers all around, deeper, darker, and more sinister than she could imagine. The darkness surged like a tide, swallowing any remnants of light. Sarah felt the ground tremble beneath her feet as Emily and Lucas clung to her sides, their small bodies quaking with terror. The air was thick and suffocating, as if they were immersed in something alive, something that hungered. "Mom, I can't breathe," Emily gasped, bright-eyed and frightened. "Stay close, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. She scanned the room, desperate for an out. Something stirred on the other side of the threshold, a rush of cold air sweeping through. The once sturdy frame of the door creaked ominously as if something at the other end was pressing against it, eager to join them in their torment. Without warning, a shadowy tendril snaked through the crack, slithering around Sarah's ankle. The temperature plummeted, sending a shockwave of fear crashing through her. "Get away," she shouted, her fear erupting into fury. She kicked her foot free, feeling the coldness retreat, but it was only the beginning. The whispers morphed into a chant, a dreadful medley echoing through the kitchen. Join us, make it stop," Lucas whimpered, tears streaming down his face. Breathless, she scanned the room. The shadows looked somehow thicker here, more animate. They flickered and pulsed like a living entity, matching the erratic beats of her racing heart. It wasn't just darkness anymore, it was as if the shadows had teeth, and they wanted to devour her whole. "Mom! I see something!" Emily screamed, pointing toward the dim hallway that led deeper into the abyss of the house. Sarah squinted but saw only darkness. "Run!" she screamed, pulling her children with her. They fled into the dim corridor, each step echoing. In her mind's eye, she could feel the darkness weave around them, its hunger clawing at her back, desperate to drag them into its depths. "Where do we go?" Lucas cried out, terror evident in his wide eyes. "Anywhere but here," Sarah replied, her voice strained as panic threatened to suffocate her. As they stumbled through the hallway, it felt like the walls closed in, dilapidated and oppressive. "Mom, please don't let go of my hand," Emily pleaded, squeezing tightly. "Never," Sarah vowed, but doubt seeped in. What if she couldn't protect them? What if whatever haunted this place was more powerful? They reached the end of the hallway, where a door, much like the last, stood ajar. A dim light seeped through, beckoning them with an alluring promise. With a burst of courage, she pushed it open, revealing a room lined with old portraits, faded faces seemingly leering at them from the walls. "Mom, those people," Lucas whispered, pointing. The faces twisted into malevolent smiles. "Stay forever," they whispered in unison, their voices layering, merging into chaos. Sarah's pulse quickened, and she felt an iron grip of fear wrap around her throat. "No, we're not staying anywhere." But the shadows surged again, pouring into the room like a tidal wave. Panic ignited, fueling her flight. She turned back to the children, determination etched on her face. "We need to find a way out. We have to believe there's hope." But behind her, the wall of darkness surged forward, swirling with a malignant glee. "You can't escape. You belong to us now." The threshold pulsed with an unearthly light, casting flickering shadows in eerie shapes. The portraits leaned closer, eyes glinting, longing to reach out and claim them. "Look, Mom! The window!" Emily shrieked, her voice cutting through the chaos with startling clarity. In a moment of sheer instinct, Sarah threw herself toward the light, her heart pounding with every step. She had to keep them alive. She had to find that glimmer of hope, even if it was buried under darkness. Just as she reached for the window, the rear wall of the room trembled like an angry beast, trying to push them back. The darkness hissed around them, rebuking her desperate effort. "Mom, it's too late," Lucas cried, catching Sarah's eye with fear stark against the chaos. It was a race against time. They had to escape before the shadows consumed them whole. Would they be swallowed by the darkness, or could they wrest a shred of light from its clutches? In the beating of her heart, Sarah thought about all they had lost. The light flickered fiercely, but any hope rested on the tip of a knife. One wrong move could plunge them forever into the abyss. What awaited them beyond that curtain of flames and terror? Or would they find their salvation, or be trapped in an eternity of despair? The window was mere inches from her fingers, a sliver of hope that beckoned like a distant star in an endless void. But as Sarah lunged, the atmosphere shifted violently. A deep growl emanated from the shadows, resonating like a warning bell. She felt the cold encroaching, tendrils wrapping around her body, refusing to let her go. "Mom, please," Emily screamed, clutching her mother's arm. But a cruel grip of darkness yanked at her other arm, pulling her away from the light. "No, we can't." The portraits lining the walls erupted into a cacophony of laughter, their faces shifting, contorting with sinister glee. She had a fleeting thought of breaking the glass, shattering the barrier between horror and freedom, but what awaited them outside? What lay beyond the fragile screen? Lucas trembled, eyes darting to the living shadows merging together, advancing on them with a swift, unsettling hunger. "Mom, I'm scared." "Me too, sweetheart." Sarah's voice broke as she felt the chill creep deeper, icy fingers pressing against her chest, as if trying to snuff out the fire of her determination. "We can't give in." With a final push against the darkness, Sarah made a half-hearted attempt at the window. But the shadows struck back, a snake-like force snapping around her waist. Hot panic surged, constricting her lungs. She screamed but quickly stifled the sound, knowing it would only give the shadows more power, feeding their malignant desires. "Look for something," she shouted, urgency flooding her words. If this room was threatened by darkness, there had to be something here to fight back. Desperation clawed at her mind as she wrestled free of the cold tendril. Emily's eyes widened, glimmering with a thought. The portraits, they look like they're trapped. Could these souls be the key? But how? The idea clashed against her fear, but time was running out. Shadows flowed like a liquid curtain, voraciously reaching for them. Sarah turned back toward the portraits. In their hollow-eyed gazes, there was a flicker of life, a plea for release. If they were trapped, perhaps they could help break the hold of the darkness on her children. "Emily, Lucas, tell them we're here to help. They can't keep us," she shouted, her voice hoarse and wild. Suddenly, a wild surge of energy sparked from the air, crackling with eerie electricity. The portraits hung still for a heartbeat, then began to shift colors, churning as if a storm were brewing in their frames. "Release us before it's too late," they echoed, voices melding into a haunting chant, urging Sarah and her children. She could feel the dark mass tightening its grip, relishing their terror. "Do you hear them?" she yelled, trying to drown out the murmurings of dread. "We have to release them. They can show us the way." "Mom, how?" Lucas sobbed, tugging at her sleeve in a panic. "The light. We need to harness it," Sarah shouted, reaching toward the portraits again, feeling their desperate energy converging with her own. "Find a way to connect. Think of the goodness in your hearts." The children's sobs intermingled with determined whispers as they focused on the faces, trying to recognize the remnants of humanity within those twisted, tormented souls. As they chanted in unison, the shadows hesitated, quivering at the edges as the light emitted by their combined will flickered and glowed, pushing against the oppressive darkness. But then, a furious roar ripped through the room, drowning out their desperate battle cry. "You will not leave," the darkness screeched, echoing as if countless voices were melding together into one terrible thunderclap. The portraits dimmed, and the walls resonated with a shattering fear that threatened to collapse their very beings. "Hold on," Sarah yelled, clutching her children closer. The light in the room narrowed, shrinking with each furious pulse of darkness. "We can't break." With a primal scream, she thrust her arm toward the window one last time, a ray of hope crashing back and forth with every heartbeat against the shadow's wrath. Would they be lost in this inescapable clutches, or could the flickers of light illuminate their way out? The darkness surged with a renewed fury, screaming its final warning. But Sarah would not surrender. With every ounce of courage, she felt the energy of the portraits surge within her. As she faced the shadows head-on, a sudden thought pierced through her haze of fear. What if the portraits weren't just allies? What if they were part of the darkness, twisted into shadows to keep her from the truth? And that realization brought a chilling question. Who were they really fighting against? Would salvation reveal itself? Or was it all just another deception laid by the darkness? The moment hung like a taut string, vibrating with tension, as Sarah's mind raced. The roar of darkness echoed around them, but mingled within the chaos was something else: fear, sorrow, and a depthless longing that surged from the portraits. It was a sickly sweet kind of terror that wrapped around her like the very shadows clawing at her skin. "Mom, they're not trying to help us," Lucas whispered, his voice breaking the silence, nearly drowned under the howling winds of despair. "What do you mean?" she shot back, panic rising. "Look at their eyes. They're dark, empty," Emily added, trembling. "They want us to join them." Realization hit Sarah like ice water. The chilling laughter echoed with a renewed ferocity as each voice merged with the shadows, calling with a seductive promise of freedom that turned her stomach. The portraits weren't allies, they were predators, waiting for the perfect moment to feast on hope, turning it into despair. "You must choose," the shadows chanted, their chorus twisting uncomfortably around her spirit. "No," Sarah cried as tendrils of dread tightened their hold. She felt her heart pounding like a war drum, urging her to fight, to flee. But where? The window was only an illusion now, a mirage that flickered with every desperate thought she had. "Mom!" Emily shouted, her small hands gripping Sarah's in a panic. "They're coming." Indeed, the shadows darted forward, swirling like ink spilled on paper, ravenous tendrils stretching to envelop them. The portrait's eyes glinted with malicious delight, lingering with a promise of silent screams and existence beneath their painted facade. "Tell me," Sarah urged, her voice nearly drowned in the cacophony. "What do I need to do?" But it was no longer clear who she was pleading with. The dark presence enveloped them, taunting her with whispers of past lives lost to its sinister embrace. They all leaned in, waiting, relishing her turmoil. "Fight! Fight for your freedom," one voice called, a distorted echo of defiance. In a flash, Sarah's mind flickered back to the stories she'd read in the old library, the tales of bravery, overcoming darkness with light. She could feel embers within her, a flicker of fire against the hysteria threatening to consume them. It had always been about connection, hadn't it? "Hold my hand," Sarah yelled to her kids, and without hesitation, they joined their palms together, a bridge of warmth against the encroaching cold. "Think of something good," Sarah shouted, focusing on the warmth of their combined love, a memory of family picnics, laughter shared, and the smell of fresh flowers in spring. "Remember the joy." As if the very air had surged with their will, flickers of light erupted around them, casting defiant shadows against the consuming darkness. The shadow figures writhed, hissing, recoiling as the portraits shrieked, their sounds blending into a symphony of despair. "Fools!" The darkness thundered, its voice deeper, more fractured with rage. "You will perish. Hope is a weakness." But determination surged within Sarah. "No, we won't perish. We won't let you take us." Just as a blinding brightness began to envelop them, the shadows howled with renewed fury, rushing in like a wave. The last thing Sarah felt was the walls trembling under the weight of the darkest fury as she shielded her children, staring into the abyss as everything exploded into chaos. The world around them twisted into a whirlwind of terror, and for a fleeting instant, she could feel a shift, a moment where the darkness even trembled. Then silence, and the eye of the storm. Sarah's heart raced. Had they fought back? Were they free? "Mom?" Lucas's voice was a whisper of uncertainty, cutting through the stillness. "Where are we?" Emily's gaze darted around, desperate for familiarity, and behind her, a soft, sinister laughter echoed, still lingering in the corners of the room. "Welcome back, welcome back." The chilling words sent fire through her veins. Just what had they encountered? But as shadows began to creep again, the chilling laughter rose once more, fracturing their fragile moment. "Mom, what do we do now?" Lucas's eyes widened, fear etched deeply into his features. Before Sarah could respond, the portraits stirred, their faces shifting once again, beckoning them even deeper into a nightmare. "This wasn't over. Far from it. Look again. There's no escape," they breathed, entwined with the shadows. And just as Sarah felt herself slipping into despair, a startling realization flashed. They weren't just trapped. They were complicit in a very old horror. And the game was far from over. Was the darkness truly behind them, or had it woven deeper into the fabric of their souls? The darkness coiled tightly around Sarah and the children, whispering sweet promises of despair. It felt as if they were tangled in a web spun by a monstrous mind. But facing that shrouded terror ignited something in her, a flicker, a hope. She raised her chin, heart pounding as she recognized one undeniable truth. They weren't powerless. "Listen," she shouted, the sound echoing off the walls like a war cry. "We've battled this together already. We can do it again." The shadows hesitated, creeping backward ever so slightly, surprised at her defiance. Energized by that flicker of hope, she tightened her grip on her children's hands, feeling their small bodies tremble, but also their undeniable courage. "Remember when we faced storms together? Remember the laughter at our picnics? The stories around the fire? We're not just a family. We're stronger than this horror." Each word rolled with an insistence, an imprint of their shared love rising to fight against the shadow's chokehold. The darkness stirred, restless. "You will never escape me," it clawed back, its voice echoing with contempt. But Sarah pressed on, her heart steadying in the chaos. "No more fear. No more hiding. We won't be swallowed by you." Lightning shot through her mind as memories turned into torrents of light within her. She could feel them, the bright sparks igniting inside, each a reclaiming of what was theirs: a mother's love, a child's laughter, all forged into an incandescent shield. "You may have plagued us, but we are bound together." The cold fingers of dread shrank back, the weight of the shadows lessened, with each fervent declaration. "We have fought and bled for each other. No darkness can own our hearts." Defiance strengthened her voice, and suddenly Emily and Lucas joined in, chanting their own treasured memories. Their voices interwoven, and perhaps because of that, defiant light burst free. "Family, love, safety," they yelled in unison, the echoes reverberating through the air, shattering the silence with each heartbeat. The room trembled, vibrated beneath their unified strength, pushing against the heaviness smothering them. For every inch the shadows tried to reclaim, they pushed harder, the mingled power of hearts and memories swelling in a brilliant explosion, demanding space for the light. Then came a fierce flash, brighter than lingering shadows could withstand. The portraits crackled, their eerie grins dissolving into fear, revealing the truth. They were once lost souls, drawn into the very darkness that had suffocated Sarah and her children. "No, my power, my hold," the darkness shrieked, its voice cracking with fading strength. The walls groaned as light split forth, illuminating the room with a clarity so sharp that even the chilling laughter dimmed. The dark figures twisted, contorted with rage, their slender silhouettes dwindling, clawing desperately at the determined glow like dying embers snuffed out by an unstoppable tide. One last echo resonated, fading into the fragile warmth of hope. "You will regret this." And just like that, they found themselves standing outside their own home, on the porch drenched in the soft embrace of dawn's first light. The air was clear, the world painted in gentle hues of orange and pink. The morning felt like a fresh start, and yet every corner of their hearts hummed with the weight of what had just been confronted. Emily leaned against Sarah, her breath coming in slow, steadying waves. "Mom, we did it," she whispered, amazement sparking in her young face. "Yes, we did, and we'll always do it, together," Sarah murmured, wrapping her arms around her children, absorbing the warmth and safety that had returned with the sunrise. As the light stretched across the sky, illuminating every shadow that once lurked and threatened, a sound far off echoed in their memories, a reminder of what had come but would never define them. They turned away from the darkened door, leaving it forever behind, stepping forward into a new reality, one filled with possibility, and even though they had risen against unimaginable terror, the memory of it would always linger, an awareness that such darkness could exist. But the choice was clear now. They would always choose light, love, and each other at its center. As she gazed into the sunrise, Sarah felt the weight lift from her chest. The battle hadn't just been about survival. It had been a reaffirmation of their lives, a striking reminder of love's resilience. A shiver of gratitude coursed through her as she held her children tighter, their laughter ringing bright under the awakening sun. We must act and never act lightly. Together, we become a force no darkness can dim. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Did you think they'd escape? What would you have done? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of building this community. What are you waiting for? Let us keep the stories alive.